Hello to all you collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Mike Niklos. He was a fantastic guest. I really enjoyed speaking with him, especially about his experience with his pro day and then how he translated that into his work in the private sector. And then talking about his experience in the private sector, how it's helped him to be a better coach on the art of coaching side. I thought it was a really great conversation, and it kind of opened up my eyes to what it means to be a collegiate strength coach versus a private sector strength coach. I thought overall it was just a great conversation, and I think y'all really enjoy. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have Mike Niklos. Okay, Mike is coming to us. He's working for Acceleration Pro right now. A lot of previous experience playing football, working at Robert Morris as well. So I thought Mike would be a fantastic guest to bring on. Was nominated in the Discord as well too. So I know a lot of you listeners want to hear Mike come on. Thank you, Mike, for coming on the episode.
Oh, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here and excited to talk some shop.
Oh, absolutely. We've already been talking a little bit. I should hit record because
Yeah, right.
Mike's awesome. We've already got rolling on the podcast. So, well, Mike, can you kind of just give us a rundown of your career in strength and conditioning so far, what your history's been, and then what you're up to now?
Yeah, so I've been around since about 2007, 2008. Started out as an athlete, like most of us. Got super, super lucky. I was actually I was starting out as a double major in software and manufacturing engineering. And then suffered a couple of injuries, and a guy named Tom Mislinski, usually goes by Milo, ended up being one of our strength coaches. Ended up kind of starting to realize that, it's a real position, full-time job, strength and conditioning, all that stuff. So started kind of, hanging out in the weight room for a little bit, realizing that, it was actually the profession that, I really wanted to get into just because, I love training, wanted to be around athletes. And so kind of switched my majors, moved on. I always say I did my first internship with him just because I wouldn't leave the weight room. So I'd train there, then I'd just hang out the rest of the time there. He left to go out with Buddy Morris of the Browns. Todd Hammer came in, finished off my last year with him. At that time, went to go try to play pro. Did that for a little bit. Ended up coming back at the same time. My older brother opened up Acceleration up in Chicago. So I did an internship with him, and then wanted to go back to the collegiate side. So went back out to Robert Morris in Pittsburgh. So did another 4 or 5 months internship with him out there. Then ended up getting hired as an intern up at Northern Illinois with Coach Klein, Eric Klein, who I believe now's at New Mexico. At that time, once internship finished, had an awesome opportunity to go to the private sector with my older brother. So it was kind of a no questions. That was probably about, oh, good Lord, probably about 2011. So I've been here since. We work with athletes all the way from age 8 all the way up to professionals. So it's a good mix between, I still get that collegiate feel where I get a lot of college athletes. We were very, very fortunate to have a lot of professional athletes that come through our doors that have literally still been with me since, back in 2011. We still have a couple pros that are still there. But yeah, it's an awesome mix that, I get to work with, kids, super early, start to kind of lay a foundation, but still get the challenge of, working with super, super high level athletes.
No, that's fantastic, and I didn't know your brother owned the Acceleration.
Yeah, he actually, the funniest part, so my first internship was I was out in California, actually doing a slight internship, but also training for my pro day. And he was demonstrating he had just retired from the league, and he was demonstrating a movement and tears his meniscus. And so he's like, hey, he calls me, still had no idea what he was doing. He's like, hey, good news is I, bought into a facility. Bad news is I tore my meniscus and I need you out here. So ended up, took the next flight. I was done with that, did my pro day out of Ohio State, and then drove literally from Ohio State up to here. And I did a 3-month internship where they essentially just paid for my room and board because I got to sleep over at one of the other owner's house. Did that for
Wow.
about 3 months. Yeah.
Okay, so was your pro day originally planned for Ohio State, or did you pivot to Ohio State because of this?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, and I
Okay.
went to a small FCS school out in Pittsburgh, so we didn't even have a pro day. So I did my pro day at Ohio State, um, did that, and then yeah, like I said, came up here, um, trained here, worked out here, um, went probably took the next good gracious, probably about 6 7 months to try to be the best athlete, professional athlete I could be. Nothing panned out, so I actually went home to go sell cell phones at Verizon Wireless for about 3 4 months, and then that's when Hammer gave me a call and said, "Hey, I need an internship or a guy to help me out before my full timer gets in." Asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, "Yeah, let's go."
That's awesome, and that's we had Najib on last week, his athletic
Okay,
trainer out of FIU,
yeah.
and he was talking about that transition period, how it was kind of funky, didn't really know what he wanted to do, and always had that person to kind of push you and say, hey, like in your case, he needed an intern, so he brought you on. In his case, it was somebody else pushing him to apply over and over again. I mean, what's that relationship like? Do you still keep in contact with him after getting you back into the field?
With my older brother or
Ham with
Hammer, you know
Hammer.
what? I talk to him a
Yep.
lot. They're always funny. I'll always laugh, and um, he'll always tell different stories too about how I was as an athlete, and we had a an interesting relationship. I was always the work hard guy. I always thought, if I wasn't throwing up, then it wasn't a good workout, and so we butted
Hmm.
heads early on. And then when I told him I wanted to be an athlete or a strength coach, um, you know, absolutely willing to bring me on and kind of help lay me a foundation of just that continued education. Um, and really understanding that just because that made me a successful athlete might not have a correlation, might not have always equal causation, um, and really kind of set me down that path of wanting to always learn, wanting to always grow. I think that's something that we pride ourselves on here is that kind of Buddy Morris, Western Pennsylvania type thought process of you can always grow as a strength coach. Um, and the practitioners now that were athletes for us back in the day have seen that growth from day one to where we're at now. But I talked to Hammer. Hammer, always just give me crap that I went from collegiate side down to the private sector or over to the private sector, and he bounced around for a little bit, and now he's back in the private sector. So I always say
Oh my goodness.
we always somehow end up back in the private sector.
At some point, it all funnels
Yeah,
down to the private sector.
yeah.
Well, that's excellent. And you did say Western Pennsylvania. I had to argue with you a little bit. I am from. I mean, I went to school in Philly. My family's from
Okay.
Reading, Pennsylvania. So we're kind of rivals on the side of the state
it's
there. But
it's wild how the Western PA people literally see it as their own state.
it's incredible. Well, I mean,
Like,
it's same for Eastern PA. They see
yeah,
it as it's Philly and New Jersey in that area,
yeah.
pretty much. So yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh
Just
my
like
goodness.
when we got there, it's like as an athlete, they're like, talking about how well they did. They're like, yeah, we won the Whitfield. That's basically the state out there. They're like, no one cares about the eastern side. I'm like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Meanwhile, it takes 6 hours to drive across
Yeah,
Pennsylvania. You
exactly.
know?
Yeah, our whole conference was that side. That drive is 80 is a long, long road.
Oh, it's brutal. It's brutal. But we can put our differences aside for today.
Yeah, right.
I think we can make that work. So, and so your first internship that was at Robert Morris, correct?
Yeah, so my first internship, and again, I'll say it was a forced internship where I just hung out with Milo, and just started kind of understanding, how it was more scientific based than what I thought. I always thought it was just, and I've always, again, growing up in Columbus, Ohio, straight West Side guy. All my coaches, former, strength coaches, were all West Side guys. Um, and never really understood that there was a method to the madness. I thought it was just throw stuff at a wall, see what sticks, and if you're not throwing up, it's not good. And he was kind of really the one that brought into the idea of how much science and again, coming from an engineering background, it was something I love science, I love physics, I love all that stuff, and being able to combine the two was just a match made in heaven for me. That I still get to keep that nerdy side, but I can go on, throw 6 7 plates around and still be a meathead that I like being.
That's awesome. And I feel like that's the typical strength coach kind of homeostatic curve is the workouts
Yeah.
need to be super hard. And then you kind of go, okay, well, maybe they need to be easier. And then you may say, maybe that was too easy. And you kind of just go along this wave. So, but when you understood that about your workouts and when you spent that time with Milo, do you feel like it kind of changed? I mean, well, obviously it changed your philosophy, but you feel like it changed your work ethic or how you approach your workouts from then on personally?
It's weird. And it's funny you say that. I still train like an idiot. Um, I would not train my athletes the way I train myself. I'll make, and I did some powerlifting, did all that stuff. Still, strength is, for me, an absolute priority. Um, you know, I'll make calls on my list that I would never make for an athlete. Um, but I always try to have that balance of, I'm me, do what I say, not what I do. I think, that's where understanding, for me, it's, I I can get hurt and be okay. I can
Mm,
still go to work. I can still, and for me, it fills that void of not being an athlete, not being, to maybe not always not make the best choices in the weight room. Um, when it comes to that, or like if I'm out there sprinting, maybe not get the warm up that I probably should have. But I always know, okay, this might not be the smartest decision I've made in my life. Um, but it definitely, it gave me a different perspective. I think especially when it came to speed development, where we always say, when you're looking in the weight room and you're doing something heavy, you always need that break and everything. And I never ever correlated that with sprint work. I always just correlated with if it's harder, it's better. Somehow it's naturally going to make me faster. I'm over there trying to throw up. Um, and that's where the conversations of Charlie and Dan Pfaff and some of the older heavy hitters of sprint development, and he did a great job. If I would have a question for him, instead of answering it for me, he'd give me a stack of books and say, answers in there. And that kind of again opened up my ability to really start to read and kind of understand maybe what it was that I did that made me successful as an athlete, but also what hindered me as an athlete. I was always
mm,
undersized and, it made sense. I never allowed my body to recover. I never allowed myself to eat. Eating wasn't a priority for me. It was just, okay, how much more can I train? How much more can I train? It's like, okay, if I look at, my career, I understand that, genetics obviously played a big role in some of the success that I had. But if I would have made different decisions down the line, I might have had that size that everybody, questioned me for not having, or, I might have been able to combine that spot size and speed. And the reality, I probably could have exposed myself to more situations that would have made me a better athlete.
mm.
And I would have stayed healthy.
Staying healthy does help as
Yeah.
well. But I have one of you on my teams right now.
Good luck.
As you're speaking, but again, when I say it's even I've known you for now, it's been what 20 minutes, but I can tell, of your willingness to learn and get better. This is somebody who I have to have a conversation with on every speed day about we're resting for 2 minutes after a 20-minute run, 20-meter run, because you need to make sure that you can have as much energy as possible to run for that next rep. And he's like, I know, but I can get double the work. And it's like, it's just, beating my head into a wall in these conversations. But it's somebody who I also point out, and I'm like, man, you should be a strength coach because of the other conversations that we have and
Hmm.
that desire to push and always get better. And one
Oh
thing I
yeah.
do love that you mentioned too is is Milo giving you that stack of books and just telling you, hey, the answer's in here. You got to find it. I mean,
Yeah.
because then that also removes all the framing. It removes everything of, I try to, when I speak with my interns, if I don't like a certain system, I try not to say, oh, I hate this system. Don't do this. Do what I like. Instead, give them both the books, show them both the systems, and then let them pick.
Oh yeah. I mean, at the end of the
Us.
day, every program works, every program doesn't. I mean, it's just the context and the environmental structures that you need to create to establish what it is you want to do.
That's exactly it, right there. I mean, the theme has popped up many times on this podcast so far since I've been hosting. Is the program doesn't really matter; it's all about how you implement it.
Yeah, exactly. That's something I always take from my wife. Like whenever I'm, trying to battle with, okay, should I put this movement in or should I put this movement in, or does this have more correlation? And she always kind of brings me down to a level. and we were talking earlier. She was a former strength and conditioning coach, now a physical therapist. I mean, she'll always say the human body only can move in a certain amount of ways. So don't overthink it. It's the timing, the dosage, the volume, the intensity that you want to be more concerned about with the actual movement. And that to me always has almost simplified what it is I do with my athletes. And I put more thought into getting the dosage, the volume, the intensity, the timing, rather than, oh my gosh, this athlete needs to squat. This athlete needs to do Bulgarian split squats. This athlete needs to do this. It's like, all right, I've got 6 months. I can calm down. When in the time does this actually work?
Oh yeah, I've noticed my programs as I get further into the field start to get a lot more similar.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Amongst my different sports and different teams, they start. I usually have the main hitters, and I like to stick with those. So,
Yeah.
okay. So one thing I am very curious about is your pro day. Pro day is this day where it's like the biggest day of an athlete's life. It seems like sometimes, and everybody kind of forgets that you have a whole lexicon of work and different experiences behind it, and it gets to be this hyped up deal. But at the same time, a lot of scouts really kind of can notice you from your pro day. It can really pop out, and you can really make a statement with your pro day. So, can you kind of just talk me through your process of training for it? What was the duration of training? What was your mentality like during the training? And then what was it like actually going through the pro day?
So yeah, so I mean, like I said, I was a small time FCS guy, and it was one of those situations where I got lucky enough. I signed with an agent. They sent me out to California to do all my training, and that was it was really cool because it was the first time I really got exposure to um, you know a completely different side of what training was. If you kind of look at my career as an athlete, you had Hammer, you had Milo, and prior to that was all kind of that Western PA, the West Side kind of approach. It was always a heavily dosed with Charlie Francis, so that kind of thought process where I went into more of that. If you remember. Might be dating myself, but the high intense training that Penn State used to do, where
Oh
it
yeah.
was just essentially max effort, one set of up to 15. We would do 2 or 3 sprints, and that was it, nothing else. And so it was kind of cool to take a completely different approach to what my training is, and I responded really well to it. I ended up getting up to I think I left in December at probably about 175. I got up to about 185. And going into the pro day, felt very comfortable. Put up some times that I had hoped that had some scouts noticed. And had some private workouts and everything along the lines. Fast forward, nothing ever worked out. So I at least got to do the pro day, which it was. I'm incredibly glad that I do it. So we do a pro day training here, and I think putting it into more of a 1,000 foot view scope is really understanding. It took me a couple of years to kind of see it this way, but coming from a small school where I only played around 300, 300 fans, 400 fans. I played more when I was in high school than I did in college. Um, Understanding that. Uh, a stress is incredibly specific to the task that we put upon it. I know everyone talks about mental toughness and all that stuff, and I as an athlete and incredibly what I thought was mentally tough when it came to the game of football. I was a cornerback. I prided myself on if it was fourth and goal, and fade was coming. I could take care of it. And I was happy to do so. I got excited to do this. So but I've never been so nervous in my life for a pro day. I mean, I was shaking. I fell out of my first start. I literally just fell down. I was just so nervous. I couldn't get in my start. Um, Luckily, one of the scouts kind of told me to take a deep breath and try to calm me down. Um, and it took a couple of years to really kind of see it in like I said, that different perspective of how we kind of define what stress is and how we define what mental toughness is, and it really kind of exposed me to the idea of that as when we're training our combine athletes. We had a combine athlete that was another small school guy, and we put almost gave him like a little tunnel to try to essentially scare the crap out of him, to make him nervous, to make it, and to really give him that exposure of, how he can actually control those stress levels, those hormonal levels, to kind of bring himself down and understand task at hand. And that kind of opens up to, when we look at skill acquisition and, how we actually determine what drills actually have transfer over and not, of you have to look at that 1,000-foot view of, what are those stressors? What are those things that really um, define the success or the lack of success of that athlete? And it was something kind of cool that, I always got to go back to, trying to remember what that day felt like for me and why, not necessarily that I struggled again, I still, but going in with the nerves that I did, how I could have done it differently to give me a little bit more prepared for that environment. And it's
Mm.
really kind of laid a platform of, and a foundation of how we kind of look at drill structure, how we kind of look at, how an athlete goes from, just a closed end, basic technical, drill all the way up into what a game looks like or a small sided game looks like. So, when you look at that pro day, it's just kind of cool to kind of see the progression that it's allowed me to kind of, as a strength coach, look at. And I don't think I would have been able to get that perspective if I hadn't done that, because I never got nervous for football games. I never got, scared of a football play or anything like that. But you put me out on a pro day and I it was awful.
Wow. I mean, that's so interesting too. I mean, on multiple levels. One, to talk about, like you said, skill acquisition and understanding the environment is part of the stress as well too. I mean, it took you in a completely different environment, raised the stakes, and basically, I mean, like I said, a lot of times it kind of comes across as this is your shot to go pro or not.
Yeah.
And people, and that's how it feels in the moment. And people forget that it's, they're like this, like I said, there's a lot more work behind it that
Hmm.
goes into it. But and then to also implement that within your training as well too. I feel like it's got to be extremely beneficial on a couple levels. The first is that you have that experience, and so you can talk to that athlete, and they know you're not BSing them.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that kind of goes along with every other aspect of being a former college athlete.
Hmm.
You can tell them I've been there before.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody's stories are always worse. You ran 15 gassers, you ended up running 30 somehow.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
but they can relate to you more on that level. But then two, to take that experience and really learn from it and then apply it, I think is one of the biggest steps within the strength and conditioning and being better as a strength and conditioning coach
Mhm.
is, okay, I did have this experience, but what can I do about it?
Yeah.
Not just, oh, I feel you, I was
Yeah.
nervous too, but
Yeah.
okay, so what are we going to do to enhance and improve you? And I feel like that's a really high level way to look at things. And I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, it's one of those things, and you know, I think when I first came out, I think like all of us, we always want to talk about our career as an athlete, and we feel, and it absolutely helped us, both my older brother, myself, having a football career, bringing athletes in and everything. But it's funny now that I'm a little bit older, I don't talk about it too much. I don't bring up, when I played or anything like that. And when someone talks to me about it, they're like, oh, you understand you played football. And I said, the only thing I understand is what you're going through. I don't the only reason that me being an athlete ever has really helped me is I understand what you're going through. I understand, the stresses that you're going to go through, on a daily basis, whether it be college or high school. I understand, the emotional rides. I also understand, what it's like to be an athlete. But other than that, you know, it's really difficult to say because I'm an athlete, I know how to work with athletes. Um, and I think that's kind of where that, it goes back to trying to take my experiences and observe from that 1,000-foot perspective and say, okay, because I went through this, is that something that every athlete will go through? And if it is, how can I approach it in a different perspective that allows my athlete to have a little bit more success or just be more ready or increase their performance based off of what it is I went through?
Yeah, and I'm sure your athletes are better for it. I mean,
I hope
seriously,
so.
because we all hope so, right?
Yep.
In every aspect, but no, I mean seriously, because that to me is always going to be the biggest piece. Is in I mean, you did bring up the kind of the buzzword of mental toughness. What truly is mental toughness? Well, to me, mental toughness, my definition is unwavering in all situations, right? So it doesn't mean necessarily you're ready to run the A gap and
Mhm.
immediately crush somebody, right? But
Yeah,
it does mean that you're able to take this kind of calm and stoic behavior and apply it to each aspect of wherever you see your sport. So
exactly.
again, I'm sure your athletes really appreciate that and they've improved from
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, can you talk to me a little bit about your transition, working from that collegiate space, going into the private sector? What was that like? What were the major differences you noticed? And then what were some benefits, some things you liked, didn't like?
Um, I first and foremost, I love the collegiate side. Um, I think for me as a strength coach and where I've kind of developed as a strength coach, the sports science side has been probably something that I've really kind of dove into. That is become one of the more fun projects that I enjoy doing. Um, I don't get to do it a whole lot when it comes to the private sector. With the private sector, it's hard to get commitment, so I don't get athletes, as if I were in a collegiate side where, they're a little bit more consistent. I still have the time to do it with our professional athletes in our college, but our high school athletes, we take a very different approach with that, and that was kind of one of the biggest differences, going from the collegiate side where I get to see my athletes 3 4 times in a week, of being able to kind of understand, okay, I've got 4 months with the athlete. How do I, map out their programming, to make sure that they're at their highest, performance come season. Where the high school realm or the youth level, it's so much more GPP, um,
Mm.
which is awesome. I love being able to work with our adolescent athletes, and but it's terminology is different, structure is different. That was a big jump for me of saying, okay, especially on like a terminology cue side of I can have a full conversation with a 18 to 22-year-old athlete and say things that, hey, I need you to do this, and they'll pick it up like that, but you talk to a 10-year-old athlete and you tell them to squat, they're I don't know what that is. So I think it's really kind of opened up my ability to communicate with the 8-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 18-year-old, and then the Olympic athlete. And I think that definitely has made me be more clear on what it is and the objective that I want. Um, when I get to work with our higher end athletes, because I have to be so specific when it comes to our 8 to 15-year-olds, our 8 to 18-year-olds, of what the actual objective and outcome is. Um, I think when it comes to the private sector, I think the best thing I love about it is the stability. I think we all kind of do. Um, yeah, the collegiate side, I know even the northern staff that I was with, I think they bounced around from northern. I know they went to Minnesota with PJ Fleck at some point. They went out to Buffalo. I think again they're at New Mexico. Um, for me being a homebody, like that's highly important for me. I think that for me, the difference between the collegiate side and the private side is one of the biggest benefits, and something that I hope that one day we all can kind of work on as a profession and a community, to make the job market a little bit more stable, when it comes to different colleges and everything. Um, I think the downside, and again, I'll say I'm super super fortunate of being able to work with our college and professional athletes. That 8 to 18-year-old is more general physical preparedness. Getting them to understand how the body moves, opening up, different doors on a neurological side. So the programming becomes a lot less, but your on floor has to be a lot more, in my opinion.
Mm.
Where you have to understand how to keep the games or whatever we're doing fun. You have to make sure that that they stay involved. They stay. You have to make sure that you understand that what the cues that work for the 10-year-old probably doesn't work for the 15-year-old, and how to have those conversations and that quote unquote buy-in, because we are different. It's there's 1,000 different facilities around here. We're probably one of the few that take the perspective that we do, which isn't mental toughness, yell, 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 and run until they throw up. We have to have that communication of, hey, we want this maximal effort. We want this to be, something that you can hit, that's not just over and over and over. So opening those doors of communication, that was something that I wasn't good at when I first was a strength coach, when I first got here. I knew what I was supposed to do. I knew that, okay, for every 10 yards, I need a 1 minute break, but I didn't have the confidence of it. And specifically for me personally, I didn't have communication skills to elaborate my opinions, my thoughts. And so I would lean on just, okay, the parent wants me to ruin their kid or make them throw up. So I was that guy. I was that, yeller. I was that mental toughness guy. But as I started to do a better job communicating and having to communicate with so many parents, so many athletes, I started to be able to understand, okay, the better relationship I have with these parents and these athletes, the better I am going to be at, my job, and the more freedom I'm going to have. And I don't necessarily think, and again, I say this with purely just me personally, I don't necessarily know if I would have had that same growth in the collegiate side, because they understood what I wanted. And it was like, okay, if you don't want to do it, get out. Where the private side, if they don't do what I want to do, I'm not getting a paycheck. And again, obviously I simplify that, but I think for me personally, the growth that I had to have communicating had to be so substantial, because it wouldn't make sense to a parent if I use 2, 3, 4 syllable words, or I talk about neuroplasticity. I don't know what that means, or a kid for that matter. So it definitely has helped me on that side. But the downside is, like I said, I don't think challenging wise I get to be the programmer that I highly enjoy doing. Like I said, I'm so grateful that our professional athletes do continue to come back through our doors. So I get that ability to, get that fix. But man, it's so cool as the sports science side is opening up to start going down those rabbit holes. Started going back into Python. I'm starting to, I'll do all that stuff. Just, I don't know when I'll need it, but man, it's fun. And being able to
useful.
bounce back and forth between that. So it is cool. It's definitely a different, perspective. I love the fact that I get to work with athletes. I love the fact that our athletes are 25, 26, and they'll come back, and come say hi, tell us how they're doing, as professionals. But my ability to program and everything, I think, could easily be a little bit more stagnant if I didn't have the challenges of our college and our professional athletes. Because I think at that youth level, it's like my wife said, human body only moves a certain amount of times and in a certain amount of ways, and it's keeps it general, but it also allows us to open up the doors to have a little bit more fun with the kids.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot of things I think I take for granted working on the collegiate side that I think about now, and I think one of the things that you did talk about though is so important to me, and where I've been fortunate to have mentors, and then, hopefully spread the message to the interns as well. It is that mental toughness piece, like you talk about, that aspect of, collegiate sports, they're locked in for 4 years. Unless they're really a high level athlete or the transfer portal,
Yeah.
they're going to be with you for 4 years, so every coach takes that approach. And so, it is very easy to fall into the trap of, well, we're just going to do it my way, or we're like, I don't really care if you don't want to do it. Like, this is what it's going to be,
Yeah.
and there's times where I pull that card because I know that there's certain things that are really essential, and I do have the card,
Yeah.
But I think that as I've experienced more in strength and conditioning, the more I've realized, okay, too, like, that card may work in the moment, but it ultimately hurts the relationship underneath. If we've got our best player and he repeatedly wants to comes in and says, "Hey, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I don't want to do this," and I keep saying, "I don't care, I don't care, I don't care." Ultimately, it chips away at his belief and his love in the weight room, and it's unfortunate because you can't foster that relationship and foster that love for the weight room. That's ultimately something that's really going to help him get to that next level.
Yeah.
And at the pro level too, and you work with pros, you know how this is. If you don't take care of that, you're going to get cut. Like it's just as simple as that. So how am I helping this person in the moment? Besides, you can't find them in college, and so you basically just yell and say you can't do this, but it also kind of affects relationships as the new freshmen come in too, because then it's like, okay, well, people are probably going to listen to the best player. If the best
Yeah.
player says, well, you know what, I don't really like Connor, he's a bad strength coach, don't listen to him,
Hmm.
automatically they're coming in like, I'm not going to listen to what this guy's saying. So, I bring all this and I say all this because what you're saying about, necessarily the programming side, you don't get to do as much fun stuff, but the relationship development side and the art of coaching side, you get to do a lot more, and you've developed a lot more, and it's helped you on the private sector side. To me, that's the more valuable side
Yeah.
ultimately, because like
Yeah.
we said, every program works. It's all
Mhm.
about how you implement it. So can you develop that love? Can you develop that relationship? And can you find them, coming in the weight room and enjoying the process of getting better? So
Uh,
ultimately, my hat's off to you, because I think that's the bigger piece of it, and I think that's
uh,
what you get the most out of for
and
sure.
like what you just said, I mean, I think at the end of the day, as a collegiate side, you always have that card, right? You can always play that, hey, it's my way or get out. And I mean, exactly what you just said. I think that, is one of the more important things that I really think is, when you look at, and I think I have the benefit of being on both sides of the kind of the old school coaching mentality where it's a little bit more authoritarianism, where you get to say, okay, it's my way or the highway, to, a newer age where we understand that you have to build relationships to build trust. So, and you said it perfectly about, you will always have a card that says, you know what, at the end of the day, if you ever want to touch that field, you do it my way. But you also just said it perfectly. If you want to build that trust and that long term relationship, and I think, you know, when we're looking at, creating a buy in or creating, that athlete wanting to be in the weight room, wanting to be successful in the weight room, they have to understand where you're coming from. So having that door of communication saying, hey, this moment, I need you to do what I need. I need you to do that, but also giving them the autonomy to have some freedom. I think that's something that's so important of, we've got athletes that absolutely love to hang clean. And I'm not the biggest hang clean fan. It's to me, I'd personally, I'd want to just do a jump or a throw, but I'm not going to stop that athlete to say, okay, you know what? It's only me. You can only jump or throw here. You want cleans? Cool. Let's bring in cleans. So having that balance of, building the trust in that athlete, and those athletes that when I say, okay, cool, you want to clean, let's do it, tend to really be your biggest fans because you're willing to, work with them and almost have that collaboration of this isn't your program, this isn't my program, this is our program. And I think the
Mm.
instant that they realize that it's our program, that the success is related on or determined on both of what we bring to the table, is that instant that you have that initial buy-in, and they will do anything for you.
Mm. And that's so interesting too, because I feel like on the collegiate side and on the working in college athletics, like I feel like I can't really ultimately give over that ownership of it's our program, because I do have this fear, and this is a personal growth moment. I do have this fear of like, okay, if I do make it clear that it's our program, then I've kind of lost a little bit of that trump card, like we talked about, or
Yeah.
a little bit of that, like, hey, well, ultimately I'm the coach, so whatever I say goes,
Yeah.
and it's a scary situation to put yourself in, but ultimately, if it's done with the right people and done in the right way, I think it's going to be the most successful way to do it.
And we'll always say, and I'll make sure I say where I got it from, Scott Kuhn and Cure when I'm flat. But at the end of the day, Daddy drives. At the end of the day, you might have say of where I need to go, but at the end of the day, Daddy's driving.
Yep, yep.
And and I'll still pull that card. Hey, I want to do that. At the end of the day, Daddy's driving, and
Yep.
those ultimate decisions come from me. You can tell me all you want what it is you want to do and what you feel like you do. I'll make the decision of whether it matters or not. But at the end of the day, yeah, I'm driving.
I love that one. I'm gonna have to steal that for the future for sure.
Supposedly, there's
Okay,
a
and
shirt with, and you probably have to reach out to him. I know Scotty was on the a long time ago, but there's a shirt somewhere running around with their faces that says "Daddy's driving." Um, Somewhere in the big leagues, I believe, that they
I
had made
hope
the
this is
shirt back
like
in.
I hope it's like caricature like level size heads and like driving
Yeah,
a small car.
yeah,
That'd be
exactly.
hilarious.
Yeah,
I'll have to steal that for sure.
yeah.
And so, one thing I am curious about too is, in your day, I'm sure you have sessions where you go from an 8-year-old athlete to an 18-year-old to a pro. What does that look like in that transition? It may seem seamless to you now, but how did you kind of switch gears with each of those?
I think, and we say it all the time, and and again, I go back to me growing up. I was always, I'm a very quiet person. I'm a very reserved person. Even me doing this, this podcast would not have happened 10 years ago. I just, me nervous would not have, um, and I think the ability to wear multiple hats for me is one of the most tiring things that I do. And my wife is the same way. And, in my day during the summer, I go from collegiate athletes. So I'll train from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. I'll have my collegiate athletes. I'll go from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock with our general population, which is the 8 to 18 athletes. And then 1 o'clock, I have my professional athletes. So I have to go from, almost kind of not necessarily a hoorah guy, but I've got to be somebody that, is probably a little bit more vocal than I personally like to be, into a coach that has to be overly nice and accepting, to make sure that, our athletes are still enjoying themselves, but they, getting them to understand and listen is probably, and having the patience to work with those athletes is very difficult. If anybody has kids out there, I'm sure they fully understand. Into the professional realm where they ask a lot of whys. They ask, what am I doing this for? Put context to this. So it's almost, I go from the meathead, strength coach for the college athletes that spends more time on the program side, on the, for the nerdy, and then boom, they just go. They just get to, cut their brains off and just go, to the very, passive, relaxed type coach, into, someone that has to make sure that he is on point with the dosage, the volume, because of, I don't see something with a professional athlete. What if he comes in sore that day, or I miss something, and, that guy's out millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So having the mental stability to, have those multiple hats. I get home, I've got a 3-year-old that, me and her get to play, but that kind of helps me out because we just get to play with, figurines and Spider-Man. So I get to kind of bring down my level of, having to think. But at the end of the day, that I think my wife will get home and we'll both kind of sit down and kind of say where we're at, how our day was, kind of like how most couples do, but we'll also kind of say mentally and that social battery where we're at. And if we're both fatigued, we just go put on a dumb movie or a TV show. We don't talk, we have our dinner, and we go to bed. Um,
Yeah.
so it's definitely something that I don't necessarily know if I'll ever kind of be okay with. If someone were to ask me to, go hang out, or friends go hang out tonight, no way, I'm going straight to
Yeah.
bed. I'll catch you maybe on a Saturday, or I'll see you in the fall when my time's a little, not as, chaotic with wearing those hats. But I definitely think, as in the private side, that can get kind of the toughest. I've even had an athlete that, you know, he was just starting up. He's 10 years old, again, really reserved kid. And, I was coaching. He came in at 9 o'clock, which was the end of our college, where, I was speaking vocally. I had 15, 20 athletes at the time, coaching through. So, that quote unquote coach's voice was coming out. And he was incredibly scared to come in and work with us
Mhm.
because that's what he saw. He saw me being this, yeller, or somebody that's, trying to make sure that he's, handling the room to make sure that everything's going on the way I wanted it to. I mean, I asked the dad if, it was okay if we just kind of talked for a little bit, and, getting him to, feel more comfortable with me. Because if I didn't have that time, there's a good chance that he would never come back. He wouldn't
Mm.
want to come back. He'd be afraid to come back. And now he's one of our favorite athletes. He comes in and tells us all the stories of, he does taekwondo and jiu-jitsu. And now he gets to, so you see the kid that, didn't want to talk or didn't even want to be with us, to the kid that, now is excited to tell us, what he did that prior day. So it definitely does get taxing. And there's absolutely been a lot of times where I gray those lines,
Yeah.
that I, probably shouldn't have been as, aggressive, so to speak, going into the 9 or 10 o'clock where I should have been, take my step back or done something to kind of bring my, parasympathetic levels down, so to speak, to just kind of calm down. But it's definitely probably one of the more challenging things we have to do.
But I feel like that has to be what your accelerative course is, right? And what's gotten you better as a coach, and
Mhm.
what has made you basically improve so much on that communication standpoint. Because you have these different groups, you work with these different groups, you have to switch, you have no breaks, immediately roll right into the next one, and then make that quick switch. And then somebody like your 10-year-old, I have one of those 10-year-olds on my team right now.
Mhm.
But they're 19, and working with them and understanding how to get them involved in that process, and in loving the weight room and developing that relationship is it's all about switching those hats. And even from second to second on the floor, I may have to do it with one athlete where I can say, hey, that wasn't deep enough, get lower, like you said. And the next one is like, maybe just a little bit lower, may work a
Yeah.
little bit, let's
Yeah.
see. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
feel like that's your perfect course right there.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
excellent. All right, the last question I have for you, and this may not be, well, it's not going to be visible to people who are listening, but
Mhm.
I'm looking at it. You have a million trophies behind you right now. I have to ask about the trophies. Where are those from? How did you get those?
So we got. I'm sure someone can
Oh my goodness!
say we
Whoa, you were showing me
so
the small side of the collection.
so we coach a 7-on-7 club football team called the Midwest
Awesome.
Boom. So my older brother's the head guy I work with, the defensive side. So it is cool. I get to and we talk about the big differences of the collegiate side of the private sector, but then it also gets to kind of go into the sports side. Is I still get to work with athletes on a technical tactical side. Um, so we travel across the country. We're more of an all-star team, so we select all around the Chicagoland area. Um, but we do try to attack it as what a college would look like. So we get practice once a week, but that college that practice is fully periodized out. I get a chance to look at and talk to some of the other coaches of depending on how far out the um, tournament that we have, is it going to be more of a high speed day? Is it going to be more of a density day? Is it going to be more of a realization day? So I get that tactical periodization part of, that I get to go in and specifically for me on like the skill acquisition side, it's something that I think I'm super interested in, um, both on a physical and a neurological side of actually how the brain starts to take in information, what it is we do if it actually has translation or not. So I get to work with some of the nation's best players, and get to almost kind of see okay, is what we did during practice actually have true carryover into what it is during the game? Are they actually understanding what it is? And I also get to be a little bit more creative in the side of they all come from technical coaches. They all come from their sport coaches, where I don't try too much to work their technical side. I just try to get them to be exposed into certain situations that they're going to be put into a 7-on-7 or an 11-on-11 game. So it's been a lot of fun, and I think we've it's really gotten to a point where we get to have that ability to um, play around with drill sets, play around with just different drill selection of, hey, this tournament, our players had trouble doing this. Okay, how are we actually going to build up for the next 4 weeks? Um, different drill sets that, will actually have carryover to fix whatever that issue is. So it's awesome in the fact that I still get to be in the game that I love, but I still get to be that, that high performance kind of ability to really adjust the model, and what practice looks like and practice structure looks like based off of the needs that, we need to accomplish, within whatever tournament that we're going to.
Wow. And so it definitely scratches the sports scientist itch,
Yeah.
but it looks like a lot of fun. You said it was fun. It looks like a lot of fun with all those trophies back there. I would like sleep with those. I would take every morning selfie with those, everything.
It's a blast. It's
That's amazing.
it's definitely it's one of those things that it can be done right or wrong. And it's cool from our perspective of what we display on a social media side to what it is actually who we are.
Yeah.
My older brother is for those viewers that end up typing it in, you'll see, we're very outrageous. We talk a lot. My brother wanted to be a professional wrestler. That was what he wanted to do beyond football or in place of football. So we get to wear a different hat of different personalities, but then we still get that itch of being on nerdier side where, when we're at practice, everything is structured out as exactly as we would want it to be, out of collegiate side. We get to hold meetings. We get to have all that stuff. So it's cool because it grows, in my opinion, it grows with the athlete as far as, the athletes love the social media side. They love that side. And so we can be, old man yelling at clouds and saying, no, you can't do this. You're total line, all this stuff. Or, we give them the freedom to have some fun, enjoy themselves, put a smile on their face, but also bring them down to what our standards are of, you're showing up to practice. This is how we run a practice. This is, when you go to a college, it's going to be exactly set up in a way that, promotes performance and promotes, them getting prepared for it. So it's fun to try to have that balance. And every year we talk about, man, am I too old for this? Are these kids, am I so far gone that, I'm that old man yelling at clouds now? Or, do we find that balance of, what our standards are and what our preferences are? So, and I think, with the showing of all the trophies, I think we have a good balance, whether or not, people agree or disagree, but, the kids are fun. They enjoy it. That we get to give back to, again, the sport that we love and that we feel has given us so much.
I think that stuff is so important, though. I mean, like, especially in a 7-on-7 situation where, it doesn't necessarily directly affect recruiting, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that may be somewhere you can get looks, but like, the whole thing, the whole reason I love strength and conditioning is because it is fun.
Yeah.
Like, we do the stupid stuff. Like,
Yeah.
the interns come in, like, I'll be like, let's do 10 by 10 today. Why not?
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like, like you talk about your own programs, like, it's about having fun,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what fosters a love for it. So I love the take that you guys have on it. And next time I'm in Chicago, if you ever need a hype man, I'll come
My
out there. I'll be
man.
loud. I do a
I'm
pretty good Ric Flair impression. I'll do it for you later,
my
but
man. I love it. I
we can
love
roll
it.
from there. Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it, man. It was a
Oh,
fantastic episode.
absolutely, man. I greatly appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Oh my goodness. Well, if anybody wants to reach you, what social medias can they find you at?
Oh, good Lord.
I put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Luckily, I've got multiple computers over here that I can look up
It's
real
the first
quick.
time I've asked that question too. I don't know why it just
Let me
popped out, but
Instagram. I think it's something Coach Niklos. I think my Twitter is Coach Niklos 11.
okay.
And I believe my Instagram is Niklos 11. Easier if anyone has any questions or anything like that, Mike at accelerationpro.com. That's probably
Perfect.
the
There
easiest
you go.
way.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike.
Absolutely.